The custodial death of Jayaraj and his son Benix in Tamil Nadu's Tuticorin on June 22 has sparked outrage against police brutality. Reports have emerged on how the duo was tortured and sexually assaulted while in police custody at the Sathanakulam police station. As of now, 5 police officers from Sathanakulam police station have been arrested and local revenue officers have been made in charge of the station to avoid tampering of evidence. As the case remains under investigation, there are 2 concerns that it has raised. Number 1, that of police brutality, and number 2, that of police accountability. Police brutality as a phenomenon is not new to India. According to a report by National Campaign Against Torture, the National Human Rights Commission of India recorded 1,723 cases of custodial deaths from January to December 2019. Out of these, 1,606 deaths took place in judicial custody and 117 deaths took place in police custody. Around 74.4% of the deaths in police custody took place due to alleged torture. Other forms of police brutality have also garnered public attention. During the lockdown announced in light of the coronavirus pandemic, reports pointed out how the police beat migrant labourers who were on their way home. Before this, when riots took place in northeast Delhi in February 2020, a video emerged where the police on duty could be seen forcing 5 Muslim men who lay injured to sing the national anthem. One of the boys, Faizan, also passed away following this incident. In light of such recurrent incidents, attempts have been made to put checks and mechanisms in place. In 2006, in a historic judgment titled Prakash Singh versus the Union of India, the Supreme Court came up with 7 directives for setting up the State Security Commission to lay down broad policies and give directions to prevent the abuse of power by the police. As a part of these directives, the court directed the setting up of 3 institutions. Number 1, the State Security Commission, which would lay down the broad policies and give directions for the performance of the preventive tasks and services-oriented functions of the police. Number 2, Police Establishment Board comprising the Director General of Police and 4 other senior officers of the department which shall decide transfers, postings, promotions and other service-related matters of departmental officers and men. Number 3, Police Complaints Authority at the district and state levels with a view to inquiring into allegations of serious misconduct by the police personnel. A study by Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative in 2018 observed that only 18 states had passed the new police acts since 2006. The directives issued by the Supreme Court were also applied in a haphazard manner, with states falling short of one guideline or the other. For instance, while 27 out of 29 states constituted the State Security Commission, only 8 states were found to have fulfilled the requirement to prepare an annual report of the State Security Commission and table it before the legislature. To sum it up, no state fully applied the guidelines they were supposed to. Hence, while we have methods to ensure police accountability, they have not been enough. To know more about police accountability in India, we spoke to Nikita and Ameya, who run the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project.
I mean, as all of us know, that police using violence is not really a new phenomenon. And we've been talking about this, how during the lockdown and during the Delhi pogrom we saw, but violence is an everyday function of the police, whether it's physical violence, whether it's curbing liberation in other ways, whether it's making people, certain communities, part of pulling them into the criminal justice system, torture inside police stations, the corruption. I mean, these are really the everyday realities of the police station. And it's also the time where, both because during the lockdown and suddenly a lot more of law and order having to be implemented by the police, you could see a lot more of it. And as the technology improves, we'll get to see a lot more of it now that a lot of it is being captured on mobile cameras.
The reasons why the police force was constituted in India helps to understand why the police often functions in a violent manner.
I think one will have to go back to and see, which is to put this in a sort of historical context and see that the system of policing has emerged to safeguard existing power structures in society, right? So it's this form of social control that has been put into place during the colonial era. It's that it came into place to say that the colonial subjects have to be watched and be put in place. Given that sort of historicity of this particular institution, and now if we were to see it in the present post-independence context, it's serving the same function in terms of entrenching the social structures and the power hierarchy that exist in society currently. So I think when an institution has been built to to entrench power structures, I think then there is very little inclination to want to do something or to build systems of accountability that would change that.
Currently, policing is a state subject in India. This means that different states have different guidelines for their respective police forces. However, most of the guidelines adopted by the states have been modelled after the Police Act of 1861. The Police Act of 1861 was legislated by the British after the revolt of 1857, often referred to as the First War of Independence. It was the first time that there was an organised rebellion against the rule of the British and the East India Company. The police force thus came into being as a means of crushing dissent and not as a democratic move. The practice has continued even after India became independent. For instance, recently the police used lethal force against those protesting against the CAA and NRC. And even though it is possible to hold the police accountable for their actions by seeking the aid of judicial processes and mounting public pressure, it remains a long drawn process full of hurdles. Despite setting up different committees to look into the matter of police brutality and the introduction of police reforms, the situation on ground still remains grim.
There is that sort of judicial involvement that one can rely on, but within the system, it seems like there are no systems of accountability or check. And of course, one can also invoke judicial powers in this regard, but that is also very sporadic. There isn't a history of judicial intervention to address questions of police brutality. And I mean, there have been several committees that have spoken about police excesses, but the recommendations also of these committees remains unimplemented to this day. So at this point, there are no robust systems in place to hold the police accountable.
The need, therefore, is to transform the role of the police in relation to the citizen.
I think because it's so structural, incremental reforms are not going to change things a lot. And you can set up a police accountability authority, but I mean, it's going to be headed by the same kind of people that are already overseeing things in judiciary, within the police force. So I mean, certainly it will be a step towards accountability, but it's definitely not likely to be like a magic wand to problem accountability.
I think it's also important to think about our tendency to rely on criminal law. Even responding to a public health crisis that we're currently confronted with using criminal law, I think is for us to think about and reflect on whether it is the best place or is criminal law a one-stop solution to everything. Our approach to dealing with the issue will have to be a transformative approach than just merely relying on systems of reformation.